Ever heard of experiments in psychology? And no, I don't mean these kind of experiments.
Experiments in psychology can be said to be a systematically arranged condition designed to arrive at a causal explanation for an observed event.
In psychology, experiments are not just carried out with test tubes and beakers, but in our comfortable rooms and our environment with participants and variables to consider.
Now let's meet the different types of experiments in psychology.
Hello, I'm laboratory experiment. I'm a type of experiment that is conducted in a highly controlled environment by researchers. I'm the type of experiment that researchers manipulate the independent variable and control the extraneous variables in order to test its effect on the dependent variable. I am precise, I follow standard procedures, and I can be replicated. My type of experiment is criticized due to its artificial nature. That is, it doesn't allow participants to act naturally as opposed to when it's in a natural setting. An example of this experiment is Solomon Ash's experiment of conformity. This experiment showed the effects of group pressure on individual judgment.
Hello, I am field experiment, and I am the kind of experiment researchers use to observe the relationship between variables in the natural environment. Unlike the lab-controlled environment, whereas experiments are being carried out in controlled environments, in the field experiment, you are being able to carry out experiments in the natural settings like the homes, the school, the canteens, the park, and even the online setting. In the field experiment, we have the place of what we call randomization, in the sense that researchers randomly assign participants to either a control group or a treatment group. A control group is a group that doesn't receive any form of treatment, while the treatment group receives the treatment and the place of the independent variable. Now, we have some key components of field experiments, of which includes 1, the manipulation of the independent variable, 2, randomization, and 3, the real-life setting.
I'm ex post facto experiments. I'm that type of experiment where the independent variable has already occurred before the study begins. The researcher does not manipulate the variable, but instead examine its possible effects on a dependent variable. For example, a psychologist studies adults who experience childhood trauma and compares the anxiety levels with adults who did not experience trauma. For this reason, ex post facto experiments are often classified as a subtype of quasi-experiments.
I am between subject experiments. I'm a type of experiment in which different groups are exposed to different experimental conditions, of which each participant partakes in only one experimental condition. I'm a type of experiment that is used when exposure to multiple experimental conditions would influence the results. I minimize fatigue and practice effect, which is a condition where a participant partakes in multiple experimental conditions and learns to adapt to it over time. This really influences the validity of the experiment. An example of this experiment is where individuals are separated randomly into 2 different groups, of which each group is made to perform a memory task, one in a noisy environment and one in a quiet environment, to test the effect of noise on their memory.
I am quasi-experiment, and I am the kind of experiment used by researchers to observe the relationships of variables and the impact of intervention on a targeted population without the use of randomization. This is said that in quasi-experiments, randomization is impossible or unethical. The key component in quasi-experiments is based on ethical consideration. It is said that in quasi-experiments, it is unethical to deprive a group of healthy children food because of the research of hunger on the academic performances of children. It advises, while not go to already deprive children of food, check out their academic performances, draw out a hypothesis, and write up a conclusion based on your research.
Hi, I'm True Experiment. I am that type of experiment that sets causal relationships through random assignments and manipulation of one or more variables in a control group. I manipulate, control, give random assignment and random selection. I am the most accurate gold standard experiment used to determine cause and effect in a relationship, manipulating one or more variables in an experiment.
I am matched pairs experiment. I'm a variation of between subject experiments in which participants are paired based on similar characteristics such as age or intelligence, and each member of each group is exposed to different experimental conditions. By matching participants, this experiment reduces individual differences, unlike in between subjects experiments. An example of this experiment is one in which participants are paired according to their IQ and age. One member is made to sleep for 8 hours, while one is made to sleep for 4 hours before completing a cognitive task.
I am within subjects experiment, and I can also be known as a repeated measure design. A within-subject experiment is a form of experiment by which all participants are expected to undergo the very same condition of the experiment. That means there is no randomization, no treatment group, or a control group. For example, a researcher trying to experiment the effects of music on memory recall, we expect participant A to be kept in a noisy environment and the same participant to be kept in a quiet environment. Now the researcher tries to observe if the participant is able to recall what he or she heard in the noisy environment or in the quiet environment.
I am natural experiments. I occur when the independent variable is not manipulated by the researcher, but I occur naturally due to external circumstances. I am commonly used when the manipulation of the independent variable is unethical or impractical, such as the study of psychological impacts of natural disasters. While I offer high ecological validity, I also provide less control over variables, making causal conclusions less certain.
In conclusion, understanding the different types of experiments in psychology would help researchers and psychologists to carry out proper psychological research.